First and foremost, apologies for this 5 minutes delay. I think the COVID has made us all question technology and kind of see how much more challenges it come by. So apologies for starting off late. And welcome to the Unbundle Series ECCE session 2, which will have a lot of insightful conversations as we go ahead. First and foremost, I think I'd like to thank everyone for such an overwhelming response. It's been completely overwhelming for us. We didn't really expect such an audience of such. So thank you so much for sticking through the whole process. I know it's been the second session and a lot of you have come back to us. So with that, thank you so much. Again, a very quick intro into the session itself. I'm not going to take much time to introduce what the Unbundled series is, but it's an initiative of Shiksha Lokam along with Makar Jagriti to understand what's in the NEP and start identifying certain solutions with reference to the implementation. And this is the second of the conversations that we have. Last Thursday, we had an amazing session with two eminent panelists, Chitranjan Kaul from CLR and Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri from NIMHANS, who brought in a lot of insight into why ECCE at all, the science behind it, the context and the importance of ECCE. And with that context, we are here, deep diving into what's even there in the NEP and really understanding certain challenges that there is. Having said that, I'll again officially welcome all of you on behalf of Shiksha Lokam and Makar Jagriti to the session 2 of Unbundled Series 2020. And I hope all of you have a lot of fun, a lot of learning experience through this process. Please do use the Q&A option to add in your questions, share in your thoughts and responses. We will take in as many as possible through the process of 90 minutes from now. With that, yes, I think I'll request Sunaina from Makar Jagriti to really introduce the panelists and take this conversation forward.
Thank you so much, Neeraj. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. It's really been quite an experience trying to unbundle, unpack, demystify ECCE, as one may say. And as Chitranjan Kaul rightly put it in the last session we had, it is a great honor, privilege, and I'm truly thrilled to welcome our panelists today. It's quite a stellar lineup that we have, and we're grateful for all of them for joining. First, I would like to welcome Dr.Venita Kaul, a very, very well-known name in the early childhood care and education space. She has been the founder and director of the Center of Early Childhood Education and Development for a long time. Been a professor at the Ambedkar University, served on the NCRT for many, many years, and really been sort of the leader leading everybody from the front when it comes to ECCE. We're very happy to have you with us, ma'am, and especially also really looking forward to what you have to say about the NEP, because you have also been one of the key people giving inputs to the NEP on ECCE. So Dr. Venita will be taking us through really unpacking the NEP's implications on ECCE for us. So welcome, Dr. Venita. We also have, may I request all the panelists to just switch on your video so that the rest of the participants may also be able to see you. Thank you so much. I'd also like to...
We'll be taking name one by one and we'll be coming on stage.
Yes, so I'd like to welcome Smitin next. Thanks so much for coming on video, Smitin. So thanks so much for joining us. Smitin Brid has been with Pratham for over 23 years now, and is the program director for early childhood program of Pratham. And Pratham has been leading the way in the country of showing what can be done in this ECCE space. And especially in the current pandemic, they've really leveraged digital mediums to reach a lot of children in the remote parts of the country. So Smitin will be talking to us about what really are the learnings from the present times, which can really also help us in taking forward the implementation of the NEP. Thanks so much, Smitin, and welcome to this session. I'd like to welcome Lata Menon, who has, who's another very senior stalwart, if I may say, in the ECCE space in the country today. She served with the UNICEF for many years, and currently is also leading a team which is developing ECCE content in Karnataka. And we really feel honored to have you with us, Lata ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have with us Rekha Menon, again another person who's been in this ECCE space for over 20 years. She's presently with Center for Learning Resources, Pune, where she's leading. She's a program manager there. She's leading the entire Sajag program of CLR in Bihar. She's earlier been with Mumbai Mobile Creches, and also with she's a member of ECCE. And so we really have the who's who of ECCE, if I may say so, today. Both experts who work behind the scenes, and also those who work directly in the field. So it's really a very good combination of people that we have today. Lata ma'am, I forgot to mention, will be talking about what this NEP really means for the states. What are those key decisions that we have to take? And Rekha Menon will be talking about what CLR has already been doing, which is really so aligned with the expectations of the national education policy. So welcome all of you, and welcome to all the participants who've logged in on Zoom today. And we're really happy to have this discussion, and we're really hoping it will be an enlightening and engaging discussion for all of us. We'd like to start off with Dr. Venita Kaul, who's going to unpack the national education policy for us, especially what it means for ECCE. So Dr. Venita, can I invite you to
thank you, Sunaina. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Shiksha Lokan and Akala Jagrati for organizing this and for giving me this opportunity to be here and share my views. We do have Smitin's presentation, no?
Yes, ma'am. So I can share it if you want.
That will be easier to then go through the...
Absolutely.
So what I would do in this unbundling or unpacking, not the new terminology is unbundling. What I would try to do is just go through the major recommendations that are there of the policy, and then talk about a little bit about where they come from. I mean, what is the rationale for them? Why were they thought about? What were the issues or challenges in the system that actually led to these recommendations? And then conclude with some implications of for the plan of action. How to really take them onto the ground. So do we have the presentation?
Yeah, I'll just share.
Okay. So, yeah, so can we get on to, yeah. So I think very quickly, some of the most significant and most visible recommendation of the policy is that it has modified the existing or the prevailing 10+2 school education sector. It has modified it to a 5+3+3+4. And as you can see in this chart, that this is the previous one, which was just 10+2. We all were very used to saying the 10+2 system. That started from class 1. So there was no pre-primary in the school education structure. It was only class 1 onwards from the age of 6. But of course, a large number of states had 5+ also as their age of entry to class 1. But that was more of a aberration, I think. What the policy is talking about is now that it has included a whole 5 years of a foundational stage to start off the whole process of education, school education. So the structure now includes 3 years of preschool education from 3 to 6 years for children, and 2 years of classes 1 and 2 to together combine into what is called a foundational stage. Next, please. It has suggested this process. It does not mean that physically all preschools will be relocated or shifted to the primary school structure. That is not what it means. It is more of a curricular integration which is coming in. And this needs to be, but at the same time, the policy is talking about leaving it to the states to decide whatever model they would find most feasible and most effective in their context. And for that, the 4 models that have been suggested by the policy, one is the existing standalone Anganwadis. We have about 13 lakh Anganwadis in the country. Practically every other village has an Anganwadi. And these Anganwadis, since they're already there, they would serve as the preschool center. Already preschool education is one of the 6 functions of the Anganwadi. The other model would be, because already in many states, there has been a movement towards convergence between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So in the last few years, there has been a lot of relocation or co-location of Anganwadis into the primary schools, so as to provide this kind of a feeder stage to the primary school. So the second model would be Anganwadis physically located in the primary school premises. The third would be where states would themselves start with pre-primary sections within the primary schools, which would be, so actually the first 2 would be under the Ministry of Women and Child Development operationally in terms of the nodal department. Whereas in the case of pre-primary sections within primary schools, they would be under the education department, which will be a new initiative for starting preschools with the primary schools, as is the practice. And this would also include, this is in the government system, but this would also include all private schools, because it has been seen from surveys that practically all private schools start from preschool. So they are composite schools, which have a pre and a primary together. So this model is actually that private school model, which will also be replicated wherever the states opt to do that for the government schools. And then there are, of course, the standalone preschools, which are kind of independent of any primary school. So these 4 models are visualized or imagined that these 4 would be in the field. And through these 4, early childhood, the foundational learning curriculum will be imparted. In addition to that, one of the new developments, because this is my own understanding, that as I said, many of the states have 5 years as their age of entry into school. So there's already a large section of 5 to 6 year old population, which is already in the school system. Although we say 3 to 6 for Anganwadi, but 5 to 6 year olds are already there. So while they're already there, the class, and they are in class 1, now that age group of 5 to 6 would be converted into a kind of a preparatory class, or what would be called a Bal Vatika, which will focus again on play-based and more of school readiness kind of activities, along with the midday meal, health, growth monitoring, etc. So to kind of extend the same holistic approach which is there in the Anganwadis into the primary schools through this Bal Vatika program. Now, one of the significant implications of this is that the states in this case who are already at, who are in age 5, I mean, whose school entry age is 5, will have to make a shift towards 6. Next, please. There's a lot of emphasis, because it is realized that the Anganwadis at the moment are not necessarily very optimally functioning so far as preschool education is concerned, because Anganwadi workers have to have several functions. They have 6 separate services to be responsible for, and their training is also not adequate. So keeping that in mind, there's a lot of, the vision is for early childhood care and education to be universalized by 2030, and to have all Anganwadis and preschools, wherever they are under the 4 models, serve as very robust, very vibrant kind of preschool education centers. So keeping that in mind, there is the requirement has been felt for training the Anganwadi workers to be all the early childhood care and education teachers, educators. So the immediate recommendation is to have a kind of an online program, a 6 months program for those who are already secondary and above qualification, and those who are less than secondary, for them have a 1 year online program, which will lead to a diploma and a certification. And this would, it is expected, qualify them to be able to then really create this robust early childhood care and education centers or preschool education centers. And it is, and besides that, the mentoring will be done in all clusters, because this is, if you see geographically, all clusters have Anganwadis as well as schools, even if they are standalones, as well as other nursery schools and so on. So there will be, mentoring will be done by the cluster resource centers as they are doing for primary education. And in longer term perspective, the government is also proposing to start a 4 years integrated kind of a B.Ed program for early childhood care and education, which would be located in the higher learning institutions, which is a recommendation for all training for all stages of education. Next. In terms of the governance structure, the responsibility for the curriculum, and till now in ICDS, the early preschool education component was there, but it was the sole responsibility of the Women and Child Development Department, and the the Department of Education or Ministry of Education had no association with it even. Now the responsibility for this ECCE curriculum and pedagogy will be fully with the MHRD. That is why that's a significant shift in terms of operationally, whereas the planning and implementation will also be done by MHRD together. It's not MHRD anymore, by the way. The ministry is now changed to Ministry of Education, and it will be done jointly by Ministry of Education, Women and Child, Health and Family Welfare, and Tribal Affairs, because all said and done, early childhood care and education, or the foundational stage for, according to me, has to have a more holistic approach, which includes the child's overall development, including health, nutrition, and safety and care. Next, please. That's it. That's the last one, right? Yeah. So these are the major recommendations that are there. In addition to that, there are certain specific recommendations which are very interesting and important to talk about. The vision, as I said, for early childhood care and education, as well as for foundational learning, is a very holistic one. The medium of instruction recommended, which has created quite a bit of discussions across media, social media particularly, is not going to be, I should not say that, is recommended to be the mother tongue or the home language of children, whichever it is, whichever language is the most preferred language within a class, within a composition of children. That would be, but that does not, I think there has to be a differentiation between medium of instruction and language taught or languages learned. Because it does not mean that children will only be confined to their home language or the regional language, but they will have exposure to, they can have exposure to as many languages as possible, feasible, because it is the policy rights, policy statement says that children at this age have the potential to learn many languages, and that potential needs to be really nurtured. A very significant recommendation, which I think I would like to just focus on a little, and I hope it will be discussed, is that so far, if you see any kind of surveys, you find that what is happening in the preschools around the country, whether it is in Anganwadis largely and also in private schools primarily, is that there is a downward extension of the primary education curriculum into the Anganwadis. So what is happening in, not Anganwadis, but all preschools. So what is happening is that the children are being started on the formal teaching of the reading, writing and number work right in the beginning, when that is most developmentally inappropriate for them. And it is putting a lot of pressure on them. And therefore the recommendation is that now we have to reverse the process, in the sense that we have to take from the preschool onwards, from 3-year-old onwards, so have a curriculum which moves upwards. From 3 to 6 will be the preschool curriculum, and the same there will be a seamless continuity and kind of a progression from that to the next stage of classes 1 and 2, where the pedagogy also will remain play-based, activity-based, as is supposed to be there for the early childhood. So this seamless transition from preschool to primary has been given a lot of emphasis, and that is why the 2 stages have come together.
Yeah.
The pedagogy will, as I said, be play and activity-based with no formal teaching. And these are some of the major recommendations that I would like to share. And I'll just conclude by raising some issues which are likely to be there, some challenges which I think will be taken up by Lata, I'm sure. There are huge issues, because there are the 4 models. So there are going to be huge issues of equity and quality, because all 4 have very diverse contexts. So the challenges will come with, one, in terms of infrastructure, because of the physical infrastructure, as well as materials, availability of play materials, because activity-based teaching requires a lot of all that. There will be the whole teacher factor, which will be really creating another inequity, because here you have a single Anganwadi worker who is already quite overburdened, and who has to she's not only responsible for preschool education, she has 5 other services. And here this is going to be, if this has to be done by her only, which it is recommending, despite the training, how much will she be able to do? Whereas in the other situations, other contexts, it is expected there will be a dedicated teacher. So training aside, one is of course the training aspect, which will also create an issue, because the training needs to be adequate. There has to be mentoring and support. But most importantly, in terms of the role definitions or the job responsibilities, that will create an issue. So there are these whole issues of now the training also, if you see, the challenge is that if they're going to do the 6 months of online training or 1 year of online training, can an online training solely, not being in a hybrid model, can it itself just lend itself to really strengthening the capabilities of the educators? I mean, this is one large question. What kind of training, how it should be done, and what would be the best way to take this forward? The idea is not to criticize the recommendation, but to how to address these recommendations to be able to really make them effective. The second set of factors, which are to link the linkage with primary education, because it's not necessarily a physical linkage, as I said. So in the case of where the preschool is attached to primary, of course, it's the most convenient model, if one may say so. But in the case of Anganwadis, if they are standalone Anganwadis, the idea is that there has to be a consistent linkage between the two. There has to be some kind of social interactions as well as the curricular interaction and the curricular continuity. How will that be ensured when there are 2 different institutions? There will be also issues with the Anganwadi worker being in the primary school model of dual management, because she will be answerable to the supervisors. At the same time, she's supposed to be working with the primary school headmaster and under the primary school headmaster, or headmistress. So those challenges will be there of dual management. There are also issues of the age for class 1, because the states will have some states which are already into, because we're talking about the Bal Vatika. So if the Bal Vatika means 5 to 6 year olds, but if the age, that is okay for the states in which the age for admission to class 1 has been 5. But for those which have 6, for example, Maharashtra, and I think Karnataka also, if I'm not mistaken, that means the 5 to 6 class will be in the Anganwadis or in the preschools. So how will this Bal Vatika, what kind of a shape will it take there, and what kind of a shape will it take here? Given such different contexts, will be a big issue. Then there is need, because it is talking about a lot of hand-holding and supervision from the primary school infrastructure, from the CRCs, the BRCs, and the headmaster, head teachers, and so on. But they don't necessarily have the sensitivity to early childhood care and education or this kind of pedagogy. So they will need to be trained, or the entire vertical of the education department will need to be really oriented and trained to be able to make this a success. And last of all, I would like to say that there's need for overall in the system for quality standards. If we want to have this equity and quality across 4 models, then there have to be some basic standards, basic specifications laid down so that every one of those models is able to follow that. There are issues with institutional capacity because there's not even enough resource capacity in the system to be able to really take it on. And other than budget and other such issues, a very large section of challenge and a requirement would be for a very, effective communication strategy. Because at the moment, there is a significant shift in 2 ways as I foresee it. One is that all preschools, all parents are geared towards academic learning and starting children from the from academic competencies of reading, writing, and numbers. So there's a whole convention of that which needs to be broken, and a new wave of the developmentally appropriate practices, play-based practices have to come in. So that needs to have a lot of communication. And the other is this English medium. Because if we are talking about having the mother tongue or the home language as which is most desirable, because that is where you have the child coming in at 3 years with 3 years of very valuable experience, which gets lost if the child comes into a new setting with another language. So then that is something that will be very, very significant, for which a lot of education through communication media will be required. So I think I'll just end with there, but I think I forgot to give the rationale for the recommendations. I'll take just 1 minute more to say the major reason why the whole foundational stage came in was this research that we had done at Center for Early Childhood Education Development in Ambedkar University, as in partnership with Asar Center, when we had studied 14,000 kids in 3 states. From the age of 4, we had tracked them till the age of 8. And what we found very quickly, there were 3 or 4 most significant findings from that study, statistically, which we derived from the study. One was that if children had certain levels of cognitive readiness in terms of certain basic concepts and skills, not academic skills, but cognitive skills, at age 5, they did much better in the primary schools. The major reason why this whole thing has come up is because surveys after surveys, including the ASER survey, has been showing, and the NCRT surveys, that children are moving up the education ladder without learning to read and write basics. And that is a consistent finding that is coming through every year. And to address that, this becomes a very important instrument for change, because if the children are able to, through preschool education, able to reach at age 5, be able to develop certain basic competencies, we see that it has a direct implication or impact on their learning levels in language and maths in the primary school. A second finding was that the preschool participation by itself has a positive impact. If children are coming into preschool, that itself has a positive impact. And the reason for, but that impact may not be sustained over time. But in order to sustain it, the preschool education has to be of good quality. And not only that, we have found that when preschool education was of good quality, but also there was a seamless transition into primary, and the primary program was also consistent with the preschool, and the quality and the pedagogy remained the same, the environment for the children remained similar, then the impact was very much more sustained over the years. And that is the reason why the foundational learning has come in together, and that stage has been created. So the most important thing would be to bring in that seamless transition into the curriculum, for which the curriculum and etc. has to be, training has to be done, and so on. And lastly, I would say that why we have to start with early childhood education has already been discussed in the first session about the critical importance of these years for brain development. So I think that is basically what I think is the overview from my end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we were thinking, how would we give ma'am such less time to, unpack the entire NEP related to ECCE, but I think you really gave us a complete overview of not just what the NEP says, but also about about how this whole thing was conceived and how CECED had such a key role to play in the whole thing. And I did not know about how it was conceived. So thanks so much for sharing that bit also. And I think all of us working in this space are just so thrilled that this foundational stage is now being importance that it deserves. And thank you for playing the role that you have played in making this possible, and also for sharing so well about what the policy means for ECCE. And you also put out a lot of challenges, which was one of the key aspects we wanted to take away from today's session. While the NEP is so beautifully conceived and it sounds very ideal and perfect, but I think talking about the challenges is what is key for us to make this a reality, and that's where organizations like all of us can play some role. So thank you so much for sharing all of that, Dr.
Thank you, Pune, and thank you, Smitin, for the very nice presentation. That really helped.
Yeah. Thank you, Smitin, for sharing that. I'd like to invite Lata Menon now. I think it's a very good segue into what Lata ma'am is going to speak to us about, which is essentially we now understand what the NEP is saying and what especially to do with ECCE. So it's important for us to now understand what are those key decisions that the different states have to take to make this a reality. Right? How do we really implement it and taking forward? Because understanding the policy is one thing, but now making it happen on the ground is so important. So requesting Lata ma'am to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Vinita. I think you've made my job very much easier because you have already touched upon a lot of the points that I was going to be talking about. I'd just like to begin by saying that a lot of what we are now seeing in the policy has actually come as recommendations of the Early Childhood Education Impact Study. And in 2017, we had conducted a series of consultations, and we had presented the results of the study across 3 of the regions where we had got NGOs as well as government functionaries and teachers to actually discuss the recommendations and what they saw as some of the bottlenecks that would come in implementing that. And so a lot of what I'm going to be talking today is also going to be in terms of what we learned in the course of those discussions, because as I said, a lot of what has emerged out of the study is also what we are seeing in the NEP today. So if we can have the presentation and
yeah, Neeraj, can you share the slides?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to talk about today is what is it that states will need to do. You see, before we actually start drawing up implementation plans, etc., there are certain decisions that states will need to take before we take the next step for implementation. And what my discussions and what my presentation is really going to be is what are those policy decisions that states will need to take. And can we go to the next one? Next slide. Yes. You see, there are some provisions that states will need to take. Many of these decisions are going to be very hard. There's going to, but this has to be taken in the next few months or at least in the next 1 year. And many of these are going to be politically sensitive decisions. It will require walking a very tight rope, between conflicting pressures. We are talking about, as Vinita said, some of our practices are so entrenched, so established that it's going to be difficult for states, but they will need to change those established practices. There's going to be a lot of questions from the public. There's going to be a lot of administrative pressure, and what is really required at this point is a balancing between popular demand and scientific data. And I think more than anything else, it's going to require a lot of political will and a lot of courage. And some amount of interpreting the NEP in its spirit rather than the letter of the document, because there is, it does have enough loopholes to be able to slip through it. And as I've said, whenever a state is taking a decision, it really should be doing that, keeping the best interest of the child in mind. Can we go to the next slide? I've just listed here some of these contentious issues. A lot of them have already been flagged by Venita, so I'm just going to go over it very quickly. I think one of the points that is not being talked about is that the NEP has made a passing reference to the point that the 0 to 3 is an age group that has to also be talked about. And they have charged NCERT with developing a curriculum for the 0 to 3 also. They've not talked about how it's to be implemented, but it's there. Then the next is, of course, the structure and the whole age of 5 years of the foundational curriculum and at what age children should be entering school. That is going to be the second contentious issue. The third one, which again Venita mentioned, is the requirement of a qualified or a trained teacher. And a qualified or trained teacher is not only for the Anganwadi, it's for all preschools, whether it's government preschools, whether it's private preschools, or whether it is the ICDS program. The fourth issue is going to be the quality specifications for buildings, equipment, curriculum. This have been sort of mentioned by the NEP, and as Venita said, states will need to develop these quality specifications and they will have to enforce them. So that's going to be an issue that for which all governments are going to come across some amount of pressure. A recognized central curriculum. You see, up till now, states have not, especially private establishments, have not had to really cater to one kind of curriculum and everybody has been following their own. But now that NCERT has been charged with developing a curriculum, the states will have to ensure that there is a core minimum curriculum that everybody will have to follow. The language of instruction, of course, as Venita said, that is going to come up. There's going to be opposition across the board, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on government to make some decision or the other, and they will have to do it. I personally feel that there's a very fuzzy demarcation between responsibility and accountability as far as the quality of early childhood education is concerned, with one department being responsible for curriculum, training, and ensuring quality, and the other for implementation. And this really does require very mature handling by both all the departments concerned. The last is, Venita said, curriculum revision processes is going to start now that NCERT is going to come up with curriculum for the foundational years as well as for the ECE years. And we need to ensure that it goes from bottom up rather than top down. And there is going to be a lot of pressure to go top down, and I'll explain why. So can we go to the next slide? This is one area, that is the area of 0 to 3, which has been introduced, and the NEP has charged the NCERT with developing this a framework of training of education of children between 0 to 3 years. But it's suggested it, but it's not really given any kind of instructions on how this will be implemented. And I just like to say very briefly that why do we feel that the area 0 to 3 years is very important? Because though we say that the ages of 0 to 6 is very important for brain development, actually the scientific data that has come, neuroscience data that has come in the last few years, has very clearly stated that the most important period is the 0 to 3. That's when you have the maximum development of the brain and where stimulation of young children is very, very critical. And at that is the time when they're really not going to be coming to institutions. And so this is best done by parents and caregivers. And this can be only done through parenting education programs. I'm just going to very briefly talk about a UNICEF initiated review, which really looked at ECD parenting programs in lower and middle income countries to see what it is that makes these programs work. because really this is not something that we can afford to sidestep or pretend doesn't exist, because we would need those parenting education programs. It's not, it is there in the ICDS as one of the services, but it's been largely neglected up till now. But once you have a framework and once you have a content, there has to be some amount of work going in that area. And one of the major things that these studies have shown is that poorer children benefit the most, vulnerable populations benefit the most, and the younger you start, the better it is. And so if we are going to be looking at the 0 to 3, there is no other agency that is fit to work with this age group as the ICDS. So can we go to the next slide, please? Now, what did the study show? The study showed that out of this 105 studies that they looked, there were 3 things that were very important. Number 1 is the frequency of contact, the amount of quantity of the program. So the frequency of contact and the most effective and best results you would get from weekly contacts. The second was that you don't need professionals, but well-trained paraprofessionals is probably the most cost-effective solution, and it gives you the best results. And rather than just going about talking to people and looking at education as a lecture series, it is far better to do demonstrations, problem solving, one-to-one methodologies, which will give you the best results. Now, if governments are really going to take parenting education seriously, then you would need a regular and a consistent program with a trained worker who's interacting with parents and family in an intensive way. That's what the study, that this whole series of studies have shown us. And if the ICDS is going to do it, and they are going to work with 0 to 3, in a normal ICDS of 1,000 population, and at the current crude birth rates, you're going to have about 54 families that, even if you're going to look at it at a monthly contact, the ICDS worker will have to work with about 50 to 54 families once a month, not even once a week, I'm saying once a month, in a very intensive way. And if she's going to be doing that, she's not going to have time for anything else. I mean, I think we need to recognize that very clearly. So what is it that state governments need to look at? Number 1, they can make a decision that for the moment they will sidestep it, they won't do anything, they'll just maintain the status quo. The second is that they relook at the responsibilities of the Anganwadi and the ASHA worker, say that the ASHA worker does most of the health related work and the Anganwadi worker focuses on the parenting education. The third, of course, is that there's been a clamor across for so many years that we would need a second worker who can handle early childhood education. That is another possibility that states can do. Or as a last option, that whether states would really consider that, okay, ECE is a responsibility that they should be giving more to the education department, while the Anganwadi and the ICDS focuses more on the 0 to 3. I say that this is a very important thing because now that it's been recognized in the NEP, this clamor for this age group and working with this age group and the kind of research that is going into it is going to become much more in the next few years, and we will have to find a solution to that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes, this is, as Venita mentioned, it is the whole point of what is the age of entry into grade 1. And this was one of the recommendations of the study also, of the impact assessment study, where it had said very clearly that age of entry into grade 1 should be 6 years. And what we found is that it's only a handful of states that actually have school entry at 6. And the majority of states do have entry at 5 years. We also found out that even a few states that had changed to 6 years had actually in the last few years moved to 5 years simply because they had to bow to public pressure. And this is the points that were made across the board when this point was discussed. Number 1 is that even if you have 5 years and you leave it to say that only that, state schools will have 6 years, you are going to see an exodus out of state schools, because if private schools continue to have entry at 5 years, you are going to have a lot of children who will move out of state years. So state schools. So you will need to make this universal. The second point that a lot of people said is that parents are going to object. Because as it is, people feel that preschool education, ye khelna, waste of time, what is the big need for them to be singing rhymes and playing? We want them to start work as early as possible. And now you are suggesting that they should actually spend one more year, and that's going to be a waste. So there is going to be parental opposition. There is going to be an opposition also from schools, because already many of the schools are underutilized. You do not have so many children in primary grades. Now you're talking about an empty year in grade 1 if everybody moves to grade 6. The concept of a Balvatika is that way good, but then, you know, they would move from 5 to 6. What would you do for 1 year and where you would not have any children in grade 1? How would that be handled? And the whole point that you see, you are going to have a lot of innovative interpretations of this rule, and you're going to be, unless governments are very, very firm, there is going to be a lot of flouting of this rule. And so it's not going to be a popular decision, but states have to take this decision before they can start even talking about what is an implementation plan. Third, can we have the next slide? Okay. Now, we are talking about the qualified teacher, and that is what Venita also talked about. The universal provision is fine. I think the NEP has been extremely flexible in terms of what are the kind of different channels of preschool education that can exist. They can occur together, they can occur separately, they can all be together. But the one thing on which the NEP has been quite firm is that either you recruit teachers who are trained in the curriculum, or you train them intensively to ensure that that the teachers who are going to be implementing this curriculum actually know how to implement it. This is very clear, and they have said that you would need to have a preparatory class, which means that you would need to have a class where you would start focusing very clearly on school readiness activities. So these are the 2 points that they've said very clearly. You can have n number of different models, but regardless of which is the model, you have to have a trained teacher, and you have to have a proper school readiness curriculum that will prepare children for grade 1. Next. Now, what is the problem with this? Number one, you want universalization. Up till now, there has been no formal system of registering of schools. Now, you will have to make that registration compulsory. Anybody who's running an early childhood education program, it cannot slip under the radar. They would need to register. And once you are registering, the whole idea of, you would need to give information on what is the curriculum you follow, but more than anything else, you need to give information on what is the qualification of the teachers who are taking that class. And for this reason, when you are going to say that you would need a teacher who is qualified or who will have to undergo training, state governments are going to come up against a certain amount of pressure. Number one, there's going to be one feeling as to why are you insisting on it? I mean, it's only after all teaching some young children, why do you need any of these qualifications? Secondly, even if people do want, you don't have enough qualified candidates to be able to recruit. Because up till now, and that's one of the things people have made very clear, neither the ICDS nor private schools, nobody had really asked for qualifications. And so you don't have so many institutions that have trained people, and so there's a dearth of qualified candidates. And even if you say, okay, I'm taking somebody who's not qualified and I will train them, and they go through a 6-month training or they go through a 1-year training, regardless of whether they are ICDS or they are a private preschool or they are the government preschool, training is going to be an expensive proposition. And for the large majority of these small little private schools that dot our rural countryside, this kind of qualified teachers and extensive training doesn't make good business sense. So there is going to be a lot of pressure on governments to try to get them to reduce the amount of, to reduce either this point about qualified candidates, or to reduce the amount of time to be spent on training. And that's going to be a certain amount of pressure that the government will have to withstand and make these absolutely mandatory. And the last point, of course, is that very often ICDS it's got a large backlog of people who have to be trained. Even now, very often when you are in having workers and you are appointing them, you're not really looking at whether they are qualified to be working with young children, because ICDS in a lot of areas has also looked at income generation programs. They are points of political patronage. There are a number of reasons how and why ICDS workers are appointed. And so it is going to be difficult to change that, and governments are going to be a little under pressure to be able to ensure this quality of teachers. Next point. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about the preparatory class because Venita has talked about it. But if we are going to be talking about a preparatory class with a specific program which requires children to be prepared for the school, you need to know how is the Anganwadi going to manage with the preparatory curriculum with multiple other activities that she has to conduct. And the fact that they have said that for this particular age group, you would need a qualified teacher, where you're going to find them. So whoever it is who's going to be running this Balvatika, they are going to run through this problem of where are you going to find that teacher. And if it's an Anganwadi center, even if you train her, how is she going to manage that? If it is going to be a private school, you've already got only 2 teachers for 5 classes. Where are you going to find one more teacher to handle a Balvatika class? Or is the grade 1 teacher expected to also handle that? So these are going to be very knotty problems, and government is going to be under quite a pressure to try and reduce these requirements, to say that, okay, perhaps give us more time, let us see how we are going to be able to do this. Next point. Next slide, yeah. Okay, now the NEP has made a lot of requirements for, they've asked for high quality infrastructure, play equipment, trained teachers, good curriculum. And if this is going to be implemented, as Venita said, you will have to have basic minimum standards, and the government will have to insist that everybody has got to register and everybody has got to have these basic minimum standards. Now, it's difficult enough for the ICDS, but there are a lot of private establishments, there are philanthropic bodies, there are NGOs, all of whom are running ECE programs. They may be able to meet many of the ideas of the curriculum and enrich learning environments, but it's going to be quite difficult to meet the needs of the high quality infrastructure and buildings. And it is going to be difficult for them, and there is going to be a widespread demand from the government to lower the standards for infrastructure, etc., especially for infrastructure, and governments will need to take fairly hard decisions on what should be the minimum infrastructure, how much time they can give, and this is probably going to be one of the areas where government would just prefer to defer taking any decisions and just move on and hope that the problem will get sorted out in due course. Next slide. Okay, now curriculum is going to be, as Venita said, one of the bones of contention, simply because there is largely what we have been seeing is a downward extension of the primary school. And since curriculum of preschools was never a point of contention, nobody's ever discussed it, and it was left to the individual schools. And because of that, schools that actually, the more the content, the more the ABCD that was taught, the more the formal teaching that was taught, the more popular the schools were. Now, the NEP has said very clearly that there has to be a central NCERT developed framework along which curriculums have to be developed, and you would need to follow that. And so governments will have to insist on a basic core curriculum, minimum curriculum that is there in all schools. It is also, I would like to say one thing about play-based methods. They are more expensive, they require more competent teachers, they are more time intensive, and they will not show the tangible outputs. Like children will not have pages and pages of A, B, C, D and 1, 2, 3 written. Parents are not going to be able to understand what it is that these schools are doing. And they are going to protest. And so there is going to be a lot of public pressure as to what is happening in these schools, whatever is going on. And so unless there's a lot of parenting education, government is going to come across a lot of pressure to actually, when they try to actually implement this. And many parents are going to see this as a waste of time when children should be actually employed in doing something far more productive. The language of instruction, I think, really there's very little to be said about it. Almost everybody is going to protest. You are going to, and the major protest is going to be coming from parents, because parents across the board do see English as a source of social mobility. They are going to oppose. There is going to be a lot of pressure on governments, and this is going to be probably one of the most difficult decisions for governments to take, but they will have to, because this has been discussed so much, it's so much out there for everybody to look at and talk about. So governments are going to be under pressure to take this decision. There are parents who job mobility requires that their children will be moving from school to school and cannot be learning languages as they move from state to state. So whether you are a low income parent, a middle income parent, a high income parent, there are going to be pressures across the board from parents. A lot of other private establishments across the board actually are able to run a program simply because they call it an English medium school. Now, the moment, if the government does decide that everybody has to learn in their own mother tongue, then there are parents who are going to think as to why am I wasting my time and paying so much money to send a child to a private establishment if all he is going to learn is in the mother tongue. So you are going to have even a lot of pressure from private establishments. And certainly this is going to be an area where all governments will have to take a very hard decision on how they are going to be implementing this particular recommendation. Next. Okay, responsibility and accountability. You need to have high quality teachers. That all is agreed, that it is the job of the education department to be developing the curriculum, to be developing the pedagogy, and to be responsible for the training. So the policy has allocated the responsibility to the education department to actually train the ICDS and also to ensure the quality of the program. At the moment, I'm only going to be talking about ICDS and the education department, but it also does work with the private schools. So you have the responsibility for the quality, you have the responsibility for training and for ensuring that the curriculum is implemented. But the whole area of accountability of the ICDS to the education department is a fairly fuzzy area, and that's not really been talked about. And so you have responsibilities, but you don't have accountability on one hand. Number two, the Anganwadi worker, as Venita said, is going to be under tremendous pressure, both from the education department as well as from her own department, because everybody will want her to do all the work, and she is going to have a lot of unreasonable demands placed on her. And that's going to be an area that's going to require a lot of coordination. And unless the state governments are very, very clear about how much time is going to be spent, what is going to be implemented, and how the Anganwadi worker is going to do, it's going to lead to a lot of complaints and griping and problematic issues of coordination and implementation. Okay, next. Okay, now this is a very interesting point in what I call the tug of war between informal play-based methods, literacy, and testing. Now, when we are talking about the foundational curriculum, I'm just going to talk about three things that the NEP has talked about. It has insisted that every student should attain foundational literacy and numeracy by grade 3. That's number one. Number two, it has recommended that there should be a grade 3 examination, which will test, especially in grade 3, it would test basic literacy and numeracy and other foundational skills. And they've also said that all these results of schools should be made public, and there should be a public disclosure by schools as to how their children have performed on it. I'm just going to be talking about these three things. Number one, that you need a play-based methodology, you need foundational literacy and numeracy, you're going to have an examination, and everybody is going to know how you have done. Those are the points that has been very clearly stated in the NEP. Next slide. And that is where the tug of war is going to come. Because what we have seen is that the moment there is an examination, and schools are going to be judged by examination, especially, and this is going to be whether it's government schools, whether it's private schools, all good intentions fly out of the window. You have an urgency to ensure that all children can read and write by grade 3 and are able to do well in that, whether it's a public examination or whether it's an staff, internal examination, that children will be able to do it. And so there's an urgency to start on alphabets and numbers right from early childhood education. There's going to be an urgency for rote learning. There's going to be an urgency for drilling children, because there is going to be a lot of pressure that when the NEP starts becoming a curriculum, and when they need to discuss, oh shit.
We can still hear you, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So when you are, I'm sorry, when we, states have to start looking at their curriculum, and they have to decide as to how they would like to do this curriculum revision, they are going to have to decide how they go about it. At that point, there is going to
Looks like her laptop or tablet just went off. Okay, so we'll let me switch on my video. We'll come back to Lata ma'am if she joins us again. But I think a lot of thought and a lot of work has gone into understanding what challenges the states are going to face to make this implementation possible. But it's also giving us very clear-cut ideas on what we can work on going forward, which is also the idea of our next session of this Unbundle series. So I think it's going to give us a lot of inputs, to see which are those areas we can really choose on, what NGOs or CSOs can work on going forward. So I think both Venita ma'am and Lata ma'am have given us, a lot of thought about what the NEP is saying and what we foresee. But we also wanted to take this opportunity to share some successes from the ground, organizations which have already been doing phenomenal work in the ECCE space, like Pratham or like CLR in the country across many states, really. So I'd like to invite Smitin to share, what Pratham has been doing and what are some of the things he feels that, is really going to help make possible in what the NEP is saying currently. Over to you, Smitin.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm audible.
Yes, Smitin, yeah.
Okay. So first of all, thank you Makkala Jagriti and Shiksha Lokam for inviting and organizing this webinar and inviting me for this, and feels very proud to share the panel with Venita ji and Lata ji, Rekha, because these are all like stalwarts in early childhood education, and listening to them is very important. What I am going to focus is, and the main part is that referring to the national education policy and the ECE part of it. And we are not just talking about the aspect mentioned in the policy, but we are also trying to focus on the implementation aspects. And I think that is a very key and different point for this webinar. So here is what I am going to talk about, referring to what Vinita ji and Lata ji has earlier. I would definitely like to focus on what we are doing, but reference of it to the national education policy and the relevance of early childhood education in that. Just to give you some heads up, I think Pratham is an organization working in around 23 states of India. We have a presence in 23 states. We have started our work in 1995 as a citizen-led organization. So it's an organization which emerged to help the government and community to change the education status. So that's how we were born. Uh, the point that I'm going to talk about are two. I'm talking this based on these two beliefs. Number one, that no matter, we have a very good policy now in place. We should all know and recognize that this policy is giving the ideas for taking things forward in at least in on the front of early childhood education. That does not mean that earlier policies have not recognized the importance of early childhood education. They in all the education policies that have were given the importance of early childhood education, but this particular policy gives some ideas and steps forwards to the state to take action. Now, so the first belief that I am coming from is, it takes a whole village or an entire community to raise a child and educate a child. So it's not only a responsibility of a policy or a government. Okay, so otherwise 2009 and 10 May Right to Education Act has already came. Okay, but many things from that act also has not been achieved after 10 years. So good that we are appreciating that such policy is in place now, but it's always the case how community takes it as a, what is the stand of a community. By meaning community, I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about NGOs, anyone who is not the government or who is not the system is a community. So what is our role in making sure that this policy becomes a truth? And so from that's first belief, that so we have a role to play in it as a community, as a parent. And then the second part, I think I've been working on the early childhood education for last many years. So we use many jargons in our vocabulary. We talk about cognitive science, we talk about fine motor skills. These are all words that common people or people from the remote villages, neo-literate parents, young people, generally do not follow or understand. So what the second belief that I'm trying to talk about is, simple things bring great change. So we have to simplify things so that everybody across country, in the remote villages, they understand what we are talking about. What is the early childhood education or development that we are talking about, and why we are giving that importance to that particular age. Otherwise, the scene around them is a schoolification. So there is a high trend of getting influenced by the the middle class families, upper middle class families, and everybody want to follow the system that have been established by the higher income groups. So if the schools are asking to teach ABCD and 1 2 3, so there is no problem if the people from the community or villages are doing it. So we need to educate, we need to create awareness of among those people who are on this. So I'm going to show you a small 1-minute clip. I hope it will play, and it will also play as a role of energizer, so that yeah. Is it audible?
One. एक दुई तीन चार पाँच छः
Okay. So I think the point that I was trying to tell you is that we have been working with we have been supporting 4,000 plus Anganwadis across 19 states, and we have also been working with the state of Himachal Pradesh and Punjab to help them to establish their pre-primary centers across schools. Punjab and Himachal are the states where they have started well before this policy is in place now. They have established their pre-primary program of 1 year, 2 year to welcome children early in the school. There are lots of reasons why they're doing it, but I think so. What we have been trying is inside Anganwadi, definitely there is a need and handholding support is required to the worker. Okay, but at the same time, we believe that if we can create a support learning environment outside of the government school or Anganwadi or any school, will also add a value to children's development and education, or at least the school readiness part of it. So we were working in inside Anganwadis. We were demonstrating certain activities to the Anganwadi workers, but at the same time, we were working in the communities, and especially we created mothers group in the hamlets around the Anganwadi to, because we believe that, if we can create a support ecosystem around the Anganwadi to help that Anganwadi worker to help children become school ready, I think that is what we were trying to say. And Venita ji also said that, she has many things to do as Anganwadi worker or a preschool teacher. So she will definitely need a support. So now, based on this, I'll come to the point what we are trying to do now, because so since we were supporting the Anganwadi worker and mothers, especially by providing simple activities, by demonstration, by material, so we have created lots of these 1-minute videos for mothers. Each video demonstrate a mother a simple activity, like you can see in video photos, that one simple thing that mother is asking a child to count at home: utensils and tomatoes and onions. So these videos goes to the parent, and then they try to do on their own, and then they share back what are their experiences. So these things we were doing. Now suddenly lockdown was declared in March, and then we were also not ready. But since we were working with the mothers groups, and we were quite engaged with those mothers across country, we could easily reconnect with those mothers and started sending WhatsApp based video messages to the parents. Now, why we were doing it? So there is a quite high rationale that I explained, that if you need to one need to work with the community to empower them to help their children. So, and which is quite a missing part, according to me, from the national education policy, because policy has always whatever policy or act, that they have always talked about a system or a school or a Anganwadi, the system that government runs, but they haven't talked about the community role of a community in it. Okay, so I feel as part of NGOs or the support civil society organizations, I think we have a lot to play in this. So this experience of that we have experienced in pandemic, we started sending this video messages, and soon we realized that we are reaching only up to 30% parent out of our universe. Because we realized that everybody do not have the smartphones. So only 30% people in the catchment area have smartphones or WhatsApp enabled phones. So then we started thinking about the remaining part of a community that we were unable to cover. So then slowly we started using the older technology called SMS. And since another 30% parents have simple phones, so we started sending them this 67 characters messages to the parent with the same activity, and we got huge response from the communities and parents and children. Only one between, okay, otherwise TV पे और इधर उधर बहुत सारे programs है, but I think that a person who is known to me, my Anganwadi worker, my school teacher, is calling me. I'm a father, I'm a mother, and telling me that I have sent you a SMS or a message or a video. Please do that with your child, and then I'm going to call you again to understand what are the difficulties that you face. So I think this aspect is very crucial, and we all need to understand in the current situation that mere sending these messages or mere just sharing the content on WhatsApp or any other platform or online business is not going to work. So this interaction is very crucial, that we learn from this experience. Now there are even this effort, there were few people who were not reachable, those who do not even have simple phones, like from the tribal belt and many other villages. So we started talking about, and we developed a radio program for them. And this 1 minute clip will also clarify what I want to explain what is that.
या लॉकडाऊनच्या काळात शाळा अंगणवाडी बंद आहे आणि मुलं पूर्ण वेळ घरी आहे, पण थोडा तरी अभ्यास व्हायलाच हवा ना. म्हणूनच शाळेबाहेरची शाळा या विशेष कार्यक्रमामध्ये मी RJ रेश्मा आपल्या सगळ्यांचं स्वागत करते.
Role of a mother or a father. So we are a very social country, so we have a community that plays a role in upbringing children and educating children. So we started appealing young brothers and sisters, older brothers and sisters, to help in this process. You won't believe that we have got from 3,000 villages, we have got 30,000 applications and requests from the young people that they want to become an anchor. And so if Pratham as an organization can appeal and so many responses can come, I think then if government takes it up and then things so the point is that I feel I'm not going to talk about this, but the key players, the now I'm coming back to the national education policy, which has missed the community engagement piece. I feel as civil society organizations or schools, we need to talk about it, and we need to strengthen the community, so that ये जो बात बार बार आ रही है ना कि parents are demanding school like curriculum for preschool education, preschool centers. I think we need to help them understand why this developmental approach is important than directly teaching ABCD or number 1, 2, 3. So for that, I think we need to create a support learning environment outside of the school or Anganwadi system, which is not going to come with a gazette document of the government. Government do not create, or government do not brings the revolution. That community brings the revolution, and therefore I think we need to understand how we can use this opportunity, and especially in the period of pandemic, every the load is now on parents' shoulder. Yeah. So we are trying to build anything around it, new education policy, and if we want to make sure that it is there in the ground, we really need to think about the stakeholders in the picture, not just only the teachers and Anganwadi workers. They need support. So I will stop here, but I'm happy to answer the questions if they are.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Smitin. I think you very beautifully showed we have so many resources around us, right? And it's not just the responsibility of the government or of the Anganwadi worker, but how CSOs can play a role, how the community as a whole can play a role, how technology can play a role, and not just during the pandemic, but since even the NEP is talking about using technology more and more, you have in the sense already started that process and build some good successes of how all of us can learn. And in fact, even Makla Jagriti has taken a lot of learning from Pratham's initiative and done a lot of work in the state of Karnataka using many of the resources like you've said. We are kind of running out of time. So I'd quickly like to move to our final panelists, Rekha Menon from CLR. Rekha is a program manager of at CLR and has been doing some wonderful work, especially in Bihar presently. But Rekha will talk to us about CLR's model, how CLR has been working on capacity building of Anganwadi workers and the entire ICDS system itself, essentially, and also parents. So Rekha, over to you. I won't take more time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunaina, and thank you Shiksha Lokam and Makala Jagruti for really putting the series together. And it has really been helpful in understanding the NEP and the way ahead for all of us. I would like to now, and just is it yeah, okay. So it is it gives me immense pleasure and it is my honor to actually present CLR's work to all of you, and especially in the field of early childhood education. So we are a technical support organization based in Pune, and we provide inputs for programs of governments, NGOs, and CSR departments in the field of ECD, elementary education, and action research. Today, I would like to speak about the ICDS leadership program. And we all know that ICDS is the biggest cohort for ECCE implementation. And if we, as Dr. Venita was saying, the number of Anganwadis that are there, it's approximately around 15 lakhs. And if we look at that number, then automatically we have to look at the personnel that are there associated for to the system. And that is about 25 to 30 lakhs. If we are to make a meaningful intervention in the ECCE, in the pan-India, then we should look at strengthening the ICDS program itself. And that is why at CLR, we felt the need to make design and conceptualize a large-scale program, intervention program, looking at the demand that was there. So in the year 2015, we developed the ICDS leadership program, which is based on the key components of leadership. The key components of leadership being the pedagogical skills, the institutional leadership that is required, the community development which is required. These are all mentioned in the ECCE and now even so more in the NEP. So, and to do this, build skills in these aspects, we looked at putting three key steps that everyone in the ICDS system can follow with ease and be meaningful in the system and also resourceful in the system. So the ICDS program talks about three basic steps that each personnel can follow to engage in this program. And one of the first steps being the learning that you go through. Each person has to go through a process of learning. And that is what I mean to say here is the learning is the training or the inputs, the various inputs that you're getting. And then once that is done, it isn't enough there. You need to practice and deepen your understanding and know what it takes to actually apply all this learning. And which is why we have the second step, wherein all the personnel who have learned or engaged in the trainings, they actually practice it in the Anganwadi centers to know in detail how to go about doing this. After they feel confident about implementing this process is when they go on to the third step, that is taking it forward and training the next level in their cadre, that is maybe from the CDPOs to the Anganwadi supervisors or supervisors to Anganwadi workers. And now here in this pandemic situation, we have taken one more step, that is from Anganwadi workers to the parents themselves. Okay, so these are the 3 steps that every personnel follows. And this is how it looks in the ICDS system. If you look at the cascade, like for example, in the state of Bihar, it was the program, the ICDS leadership program is being implemented at the 2 districts for when we were doing the Anganwadi center intervention. And so our program began with the CDPOs of the districts. So CLR provides inputs and trainings to the CDPOs in the district. And they have to do those 3 steps which I mentioned earlier about, of learning, practice, and then only then going ahead to take it ahead. So the CDPOs then go on to train their own group of supervisors. And the supervisors also go through the same process of learning, practice, and then following it to the next level. And they take it up with the next level of their own group of Anganwadi workers. While they're doing that, the CDPOs are there to coach, mentor, and provide monitoring of what is going on in the system. And they are very much part of the entire cascade. So it's a continuous process, and it's the entire systemic development or a systemic change that happens. And this is more sustainable rather than looking out for other resources. Now the NEP is talking about providing training to the Anganwadi workers and with the 6-month training course and the 1-year course. But we also see there is a need to provide the, the training and the coaching and the guidance to the supervisors and CDPOs who are very much part of the system. So that is somewhere where NEP has kind of missed out, and probably, hopefully, it will come up in further discussions and look at how it can be dealt with. So this is about the ICDS leadership program that we have. And now I would like to talk about our response to the current times that we have, that is the COVID situation, as Lata was very nicely putting it across about the study which is there for 0 to 3 years, and she clearly put across the importance of parenting programs for 0 to 3 years. While it is a need there, but it is also a need for the older kids, that is 3 to 6 or 6 to 8, all of that. And as even Smitin said, that the mindsets of people have to change. And what is it? What are the ECD practices? What can be done at home? What can be done at the Anganwadi centers? These are some of the awareness building exercises we must engage in. And so during this COVID times, when of course all the children were with the parents, we came up with this Sajag Abhiyan, which is the audio program series. These are weekly audio messages for parents to listen to, understand, and slowly start, understanding it in their everyday practices, or implementing it, or nurturing their children around that, so that there is some positive parenting which is happening. The Sajak not only builds the capacities of the parents, but because it is going through the ICDS leadership program model of the cascade, the entire personnel in the ICDS system is also getting an opportunity to enhance their own understandings in early childhood practices. And these audio messages, while they have been transmitted through WhatsApp medium or through home visits, it is also supported with equally engaging conversations. Right now, these programs are being held in the entire state of Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Goa, and in blocks in Pune and Lucknow. I would now like to actually play one of the videos for everyone to listen in, and I hope this works across. Okay.
Rekha, can we just play like a minute or so?
Sure.
A long video. Yeah. Thank you.
सजग चौथी कड़ी.
Is it audible?
गुड़िया का समय.
नमस्कार. गुड़िया के माँ बाबा बड़ा व्यस्त रहते हैं. आजकल बाहर का काम ज्यादा नहीं, पर घर का तो फिर भी बहुत सारा रहता ही है. घर की सफाई और सजावट, दिन में कई बार खाना बनाना और सबको खिलाना, बर्तन कपड़े धोना, सवेरे से कब शाम हो जाती है पता ही नहीं चलता. गुड़िया दोनों के ध्यान की प्यासी है. कभी माँ का दामन पकड़ लेती है, कभी बाबा का हाथ. कभी उनके चेहरे को दोनों हाथों से अपनी तरफ मोड़ती है. कभी समझाते समझाते थक हार जाए तो जमीन पर लौटकर रो लेती है. पर ये दोनों तो भाग रहे हैं, इस कोने से उस कोने तक, इस काम से उस काम तक. कभी कोई बुला रहा है, कभी कोई. ऐसे में गुड़िया को कौन देखे, उसके मन की सुनने को समय कहां से लाए. पर एक पते की बात सुनिए. गुड़िया का अकेलापन अपने माता पिता से बहुत सारा समय नहीं मांगता. हाँ, एक खास तरह का समय जरूर मांगता है. कैसा, ये करके देखते हैं. आज मन में ये फैसला कर लें कि गुड़िया के संग कुछ समय बिताएंगे, भले 5 ही मिनट सही. और ये समय गुड़िया का होगा, हमारा नहीं. गुड़िया के समय का क्या मतलब? थोड़ा ध्यान दें तो पाएंगे कि अधिकतर हम बच्चों के साथ जो थोड़ा बहुत समय बिता पाते हैं, वो उन्हें ये बताने में निकल जाता है कि हम क्या चाहते हैं. खाना खाओ, खिलौने समेटो, कपड़े पहनो, घर गंदा मत करो, सो जाओ, 1 2 3 सीखो, सच बोलना चाहिए, और कई 10 बातें. उनके साथ खेल भी रहे हैं तो उन्हें सिखाने की ललक बीच में आ ही जाती है. बेटा, एक कटोरियां गिन के तो बताओ. ये ए फॉर. हम कहते हैं, वो सुनते नहीं, हम पीछे भागते हैं. समय निकल गया. पर ये समय तो हमारी इच्छाओं की पूर्ति के लिए गुजरा. गुड़िया तो बस सुनती रही. उसने हमारे मन की कर दी तो हमने चैन की सांस ली, नहीं की तो हंगामा हो गया. पर कैसे भी ये गुड़िया का समय तो हुआ नहीं. कल्पना कीजिए, गुड़िया और आप एक जगह मिलकर बैठे हैं. आपको गुड़िया से कुछ करवाना नहीं है. आज तो वो करेंगे जो गुड़िया आपसे करवाना चाहती है. आप बस प्यार से उसके अगले कदम का इंतजार कर रहे हैं. आपको आराम से साथ बैठे देखकर गुड़िया भी खिल उठी है। बाबा आपके लिए चाय बनाई है। आपकी ओर हाथ बढ़ाती है जैसे ग्लास पकड़ा रही हो। उसका समय है ना, तो जो बोले वही सच। आप प्यार से चाय की चुस्कियां लेने का नाटक करते हैं। बहुत स्वाद है चाय में।
So I know I can continue if everybody is interested. Shall I?
Yeah, I was just thinking we can, because we are already 15 minutes over time and we want to just bring back all the panelists also. But a lot of people have been asking if we can share the resources that were played today or shared today. So we'll come back to you, and it would be really nice if you can share it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rekha, anything else you want to share?
I think I'm good.
I think the entire CLR model itself of capacity building of teachers or the entire ICDS system, as well as parents, and already what Lata and Venita ma'am also spoke about was how 0 to 3 has not been given attention, but CLR has a very solid program of working with parents of 0 to 3 years age group, which Sajag is all about, working with parents. And I think even the cascade model of training is something which is so powerful, because we have seen some of my team has been trained by CLR, and we know how impactful your whole training model is. And I'm really hoping that it is something which all of us can learn from. Really sorry we could not give you sufficient time. A lot of technical glitches initially, but we are already quite over time. I'd like to just bring back all the panelists. If you can, just switch on your video, Dr. Venita, Lata Menon, Smitin, and Rekha. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. And it has been a lot of learning. I think we packed a lot in one session. It's been quite intense. I'd like to share them with you later on, if that's okay. And we'd mail all the answers to those questions to all the participants. We'll also share a recording of this session with them. So apologies for not being able to go live on Facebook as well. We know a lot of teams wanted to log in through the Facebook live. So we will be sharing we'll put it up on YouTube or something and share it with all of you. But to conclude, and also to take an input from all of you for our next session. So as we had shared earlier, we have a third session in this Unbundle series, which is going to be an ideathon, where we are going to focus on few challenges which we are going to foresee coming from this NEP, and work on solutioning for those. I think early on, Dr. Venita and Lata ma'am, both of you shared a lot of pieces, which are very, very relevant. So from each of the four of you, we'd like you to just share if there is one thing that CSOs or NGOs could pick up, because some of it is not in our hands really. But if there is one area you feel that we can take up for working on a solution, we would request you to share that as a conclusion for this session. Anybody could start.
That sounds like a TV last minute.
Yeah.
I think that if I was to do just one thing, I would focus on the parents and try to make them understand what is the quality of interaction and developmentally appropriate practice all about. Because if we are able to reach the parents, we are able to regulate the whole demand, the nature of demand for preschool education.
Yeah. Thanks so much, ma'am. I think that's so important, and not much is being done on it at all.
That is where the CSOs and the NGO community and like Smitin and Rekha talked about. I think that's where they can really make a difference.
Thank you. Others, what do you have to say? Some other area?
I think I've already taken a lot more time than I should have. But I think NGOs have a very important role to play is to use a lot of the accumulated experience that they have to support the capacity building. There are a lot of experiments in how that is, and as I said, you don't have enough people, you don't have qualified people, and there's very little idea on how to go about training. So this is a very important part which I think NGOs should be looking at and seeing how it is that they can really plug into that effort in all the areas that they are going to be, whichever geographical area they work.
Thank you, ma'am. What about Smitin, Rekha?
So if I have to add, I think they both have said very clear points. One is focusing on parents and the capacity building and sharing the resources, experiences with the larger system. But I think in addition to this, because since they have said that, I think creation of localized content is also required. We don't have enough material or enough resources for our own children, especially resources. We don't. We need to have simple material. Okay, sorry. Abhi aa rahi hai?
Yeah, it's fine.
I was talking about digital resources and resources for children and the parent and for the teachers. We need to create that, and therefore I think there is a key role for NGOs to play in it.
Yeah. Rekha, tough ask of you.
No problem.
Yeah,
I would say on behalf of CLR, we would continue to pursue the leadership program and the parenting program that is there, and I think that makes meaningful contributions there. Yeah. But I would also appeal to the other NGOs who are really doing some great work with street children, non-institutionalized children, that is the street children, the children in the red light areas maybe, or maybe the children who are in vulnerable situations. And I think, or even after support programs which are there, and I think that those must continue. And of course, adaptations will be there to all the new situations which are there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I think I'd like to thank all of you on behalf of Makala Jagriti and Shiksha Lokam. Thank you so much for giving us so much time and sharing your thoughts and perspectives. And it's been a wonderful evening for us. I'd also like to thank all the participants who've been with us, and sorry about the time overshooting again. And about the technical glitches, but it was so good to learn so much, and so much thought and effort put in by all the panelists in sharing what was really relevant and meaningful for us. I'd also like to thank Shiksha Lokam for partnering with Makala Jagriti, and Neeraj, Mriganka, Veena, Anthony, who all been doing a lot of work behind the scenes for making this series a success. We'd come back to the panelists with the Q&A if that is okay with you, and we'd like to share that back with all the participants. So the next session's invite will be sent out shortly. We are planning it in 2 parts on 25th and 29th of this month. And we'll be sending out fresh registrations. It's going to be an ideathon, which is more like a workshop and not a webinar like we've had so far. It's going to be a lot of experiential sharing, experiential learning and working on the ideas. So even if Smitin and Rekha, if your organization, if you want to send some participants, we'd be very happy to host them as well. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye, Venita ji, Lita ji, Rekha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.